So let's cultivate our motivation. And as was suggested in the BBC today, to think of the respect and care we have for the Buddha, the love and devotion we have for the Buddha, and then to think of who it is that the Buddha cherishes the most. And if the Buddha cherishes all sentient beings the most, which is what he does, that's the whole reason he got awakened, worked so hard to follow the path and become awakened, is to be able to benefit them. Then by extension, let's take our care and concern and affection and direct it towards all these sentient beings that the Buddha sees in beauty, that the Buddha has such warm feelings for. All of them equally. Doesn't matter who they are, their political party, what they look like, where they're from. And so let's try and adopt that same view that the Buddha has towards others, and look at others in that same totally open-hearted way, without judgment, without prejudice, and with a mind that simply wishes to benefit in whatever way is possible. And then motivated by that warmth towards sentient beings, the wish to benefit them, then let's really put some energy into attaining full awakening so that we can do that. It's good to have an aspiration. It's better to act and fulfill that aspiration. So let's work towards our ultimate goal. So I wonder, in our political climate and our social climate, how the Buddha would do these days if he appeared here. Yeah. And if he talked about not being prejudiced and being open-hearted and, reducing the way in which we identify ourselves and with certain groups and certain things. Yeah, would people listen to him or would they criticize him? Yeah, probably both. So one time I was telling my teacher that people were criticizing me and complaining about me. And he said, well, sentient beings also complained about the Buddha. So that put me in my place. If they complain about the Buddha, they're certainly going to complain about me. But I think for us, it's to ask, would we complain about the Buddha if the Buddha came here and spoke from the Buddha's viewpoint? Yeah? Would we get upset if he talked about not being judgmental and not getting stuck in identities? Yeah? And reaching out beyond our own circle of friends to really understand people who think differently than we do. Would we listen to him? Or would we just tell him he doesn't understand the way America works?
we as a group would probably listen to him. Because we listen to that all the time anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting, nowadays, sometimes when you try and teach the Dharma, people who used to like the Dharma now say, you're what?
You've lost touch.
Yeah, you've lost touch. Yeah, you don't understand where other people are at. You're not sensitive to their pain. Yeah. For example, when you talk about seeing all sentient beings as having suffering, some people, boy, they don't like that. Yeah. Because you should recognize my suffering and the suffering of my group. Yeah. Not the suffering of everybody. And if you say everybody suffers, has the 3 kinds of dukkha, then sometimes they get upset. But you're not recognizing the dukkha, the special dukkha that I suffer from. It's difficult. Yeah?
Given that this is happening again and again, what do you think is a bridge to help someone in that state so that they could sort of make their way out of that locked mind that is kind of trapped with that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Especially if those people are Buddhist practitioners. Yeah. Yeah. If it's people who are not Buddhists, then, you can listen and ask them to explain more and empathize. But I don't really know. I'm trying to figure that out too. Do you have any ideas? Give them a Dharma book and tell them to read it. And then they can get upset at the Buddha, not at me. I'm joking. Yeah?
It's a work of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I do wonder if empathy is all that's asked for as the door. I don't know. This is me also trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But also thinking, well, at some level, this awareness or willing to name that personal suffering has been heightened, and also the blame for it's somebody else's fault is heightened. That is critical. But I have wondered if first just the empathy that recognizes, opens the door to go and. Yeah. But as we've learned in NBC, sometimes if you haven't expressed that pain before, then it takes a lot of empathy before you get to the and part.
Right. That's why I said listen. Yeah, and extend empathy. And hope for the best. Hope for the best. But of course what happens, in society is always changing. And, different views are prominent at different times, and then something else comes up, and that's prominent. So, I don't know. We'll see. But it's hard when you're teaching the Dharma to give that empathy to one person or one group in the middle of the Dharma teaching. Without, and then realizing that other people may think their group is being ignored because you're paying attention to that one and not theirs. And you're just trying to get onto the topic and teach the Dharma. Yeah? Yes, exactly. What's the source of the suffering? Yeah. And it's in here, and it's ignorance, anger, and attachment, and there's no way to get around that. But somehow, it's so comforting to blame other people for being ignorant, and that they don't understand us. And yeah. You know, when this came up, when I was on the trip recently, at one point, I just said, I'm speaking of myself, I am so sick and tired of seeing myself as a victim. I've just had it. You know, I'm tired of saying, you know, the men do this and I'm oppressed by the men. I'm tired of saying the Gentiles persecute the Jews. I'm tired of saying that the people in society don't know what a Buddhist nun is and they say Hare Krishna. I'm tired of complaining when people think, when I go into the women's bathroom and they think I'm so sick of it for myself. You know, it's like, that kind of mentality is so stifling. So I really kind of spoke quite vehemently to somebody, just about, you know, my own feelings. Anyway. But really, doesn't it? Don't you get sick of it? Feeling like a victim, you know, they don't understand me. The Tibetans, think that Inji doesn't worth anything, and Inji nuns are at the bottom of the pile, and there's so much patriarchy and gender. Now somebody's going to I'm talking like this. Oh no, somebody's on the. We're going to see fire coming out of that camera soon, you know. Yeah. And I'm just talking about my own experience, but I'm sure somebody's going to get very upset about it. Yeah.
I think one big difference is you're willing to take 100% responsibility for your life. Understanding the Dharma, understanding that your mind is the creator, and most people aren't there, and so it's a bit of a leap to follow you. I can imagine a more secular audience, or even a Buddhist audience, in this day and age where there is so much victimization.
Yeah,
and thank goodness you're saying this and giving a clear message that we don't have to be victims.
Yeah.
We can really trust the Dharma 100% and come out of suffering.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? We trust the Dharma 100%. And we're looking inside and trying to understand what the actual cause of suffering is. Yeah. And really seeing how our own mind creates, through the way we look at things, it creates, so much misery for ourselves. Yeah. And, okay, other people may persecute me at one time or another, but I created the cause. That doesn't mean what they do is okay. That doesn't mean we don't stand up for persecuted people. Clearly we do. We're practicing compassion. Yeah. But at some point, it's like the buck stops here. That's what I liked about Obama. He always said, the buck stops here. So in thinking of my own misery, the buck stops here. I mean, who am I going to blame? God? All of you? Well, I guess, yeah, I could, yeah. Look at how you treat me. Yeah, exhausting. totally. You know, it's like at some point, we've got to get sick and tired of samsara. You know, just like, I'm sick of this. I keep doing it and I'm sick of it. Okay, so the point we're on, coincidentally, in the book is called Emotions and Klesas. Yeah, interesting that this is where we are today. Okay, so it's on page 44. So before we go deeper with the discussion of emotions, we need to clarify terms. Although everyone in the West understands the meaning of the word emotion, there is not a parallel word in Tibetan. When I, Chudran, was reviewing this chapter with His Holiness, he and his translators engaged in a lengthy discussion about the meaning of emotion and how it could be translated into Tibetan. So some Tibetans suggested the Tibetan word nyonsor as a translation, although this word is not widely used. Etymologically, nyong means spirit, experience, and sor means feeling. Both of these qualities pertain to other mental states that are not emotions. So it's not a good translation, and it's a word not everybody knows. Other Tibetans have proposed the word gerbak, found in Gyaltsab Rinpoche's commentary to Dharmakirti's commentary on reliable cognition. However, it is an archaic word and does not include what in English we consider positive emotions. Okay. Our discussion led to the conclusion that at present there is no widely used Tibetan word that directly translates the meaning of the English word emotion. However, the Tibetan language contains words for the various emotions spoken of in Western languages. But interestingly, English has more words for different kinds of emotions than Tibetan does. Yeah, Jimpa was telling me this, that when he translates things, English has a much wider range of terms if you're talking about a specific emotional feeling than Tibetan does. The lack of a term and concept for emotion piqued my interest because those of us in the West continually talk about our emotions. I imagined what it would be like to grow up in a culture that wasn't focused on my emotions. Now think about that for a minute, because we're always talking about my emotions, my feelings, how I feel. You hurt my feelings. I feel this, I feel that. And all the talk of emotion in magazines, on the air, everywhere. Imagine a culture that doesn't even have a word for emotion. That means the same thing as we think of. Yeah. It's kind of mind-blowing. So imagine a culture where the people are not always talking about my feelings and my emotions. Yeah. It is almost as if we can't imagine because, words and concepts train us to perceive things in a certain way. If you identify something with a word, then you see that. If you don't have a word for it, you don't see it. Yeah? So imagine growing up in a different culture where people thought and felt in a completely different way because they don't even have a word for it, or as indicated by the fact that they don't have a word for it. Yeah? It's interesting, isn't it? Especially when we think how much time and energy we put into it.
No art. That's what I go
to immediately. No art, no music. No country songs, no great operas, no terrible tragedies, no, I mean, the whole world, theater, and sitting there naked.
Yeah, you wouldn't have any of that.
But what I imagine is you'd be focused on the sky and the environment you're in and how big that makes your mind. And you'd be focused on other people, too, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, imagine how it was before when nobody just went around like this. Yeah. I just got an email from one of the guys who has been incarcerated for, I don't know, 25 years or something, a long time. And he just got out. And he says, it's really surreal to watch everybody walking around with these screens and almost getting hit by cars because they can't take their eyes off the screens. Yeah. But it's interesting. I would imagine in Spanish and German there's words for emotion that translate as emotion. Yeah. What about in Vietnamese? Yeah? Is there a word that... Not sure, huh? How about Chinese? That translates, that means exactly as emotion does? Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. French, probably too. Okay. But the Tibetans are quite different that way. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. An English dictionary defines emotion as a strong feeling about somebody or something. The word feeling, Vedana, is also vague and is already used in Buddhist translations to indicate the aggregate of pleasant, happy, unpleasant, unhappy or painful, and neutral experiences. So in Buddhist translation, feeling doesn't mean emotion. It just refers to pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, or happy, suffering, and neutral feelings, experience. This aggregate does not include what we would call feelings in English, such as anger or love. The Sanskrit word klesha is a commonly used word in Buddhist texts that refers to mental factors that afflict the mind and do not allow it to abide peacefully. These disturbing emotions and views enslave the mind, confining it to a narrow perspective and motivate actions that hinder the happiness of both ourselves as others. Okay, so I'll keep reading for a bit. As such, klesha are obscurations to the path to liberation, and Buddhist texts speak of their disadvantages and the antidotes to them. Okay, so they're big on klesha. Yeah? In low rig, the low rig text, you have the 6 root afflictions. I'm translating klesha as affliction. The 6 root, the 20 auxiliary, okay, then expanded to 84,000. Yeah, so they're big on kleshas. But in English, we don't have one single word that is a good translation for the word klesha, or in Tibetan, nyomoing. We don't have one good English word. We're saying afflictions, but the word afflictions in English doesn't really convey it, because the word affliction in English can refer to many different things. When somebody is sick, they're afflicted. You're afflicted by an illness. Yeah, but that doesn't fit the meaning of klesha. Okay. However, there is no English equivalent to the word klesha that encompasses mental factors as diverse as emotions, attitudes, philosophical views, and innate, unquestioned assumptions about ourselves and the world. Yeah, there's nothing that encapsulates all of that. And yet, the Tibetan word klesha includes all those things. because all those things are obscurations that prevent liberation. For the sake of simplicity in this series, we translate klesha as afflictions and sometimes expand it by saying disturbing emotions and wrong views. Some afflictions, such as the view of a personal identity, are called views in English, while others, for example, anger and jealousy, are called emotions. Mental states such as not believing that awakening is possible are called views. Okay? So we don't have good translation items, and that reflects different ways that these societies think. Yeah? So, yeah, we have to be aware of that. All people have the same types of emotions and similar attitudes and views about the way they and the world exist, some of which are conducive for long-term happiness and peace, others of which are hindrance. Now somebody's going to take issues. I said, all people have the same types of emotions and similar attitudes and views about the way they and the world exist. Somebody could easily take issue with that. Yeah. And say, but you don't understand. You didn't grow up in my country, in my socioeconomic class. You know, you don't understand. How can you say we have similar attitudes and views? Okay. How can you say Republicans and Democrats have similar attitudes and views? Okay. So here, what we're talking about is much more deep-seated perspectives, not views that we've been taught in this lifetime, but views and assumptions that are so innate within us that we never even question them or realize that they're there. Okay. For example, thinking that we are an inherently existent person that, doesn't rely on anything else. Yeah. Thinking that things that are impermanent are permanent. All these kinds of things. Yeah. It's just how we see the world, and we don't even realize it as a view. But we all have it. And this goes across the board in all societies. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Because even animals and insects have it. Yeah. I mean, cows think I. You look at the kitties, they think I and mine, don't they? Yeah. You look at the wasps, they think I and mine. So this is, doesn't depend on your, what all these different kinds of groups we belong to. However, the words we use to speak of them and the concepts that influence how we relate to them vary. Okay? So, for example, we all, across culture, put people into camps of friends, enemies, and strangers. Okay? There's some unanimity, some sameness. I can't speak English anymore. Some sameness in some of the criteria we include. Somebody who criticizes me goes in the enemy category. Okay? But there's also some difference. If somebody criticizes me for X, they go in the enemy category. But if they criticize me for Y, it's different. Okay? And, we have different ways of responding to these kinds of things. Okay, so we're taught as children which kind of people to hate. Aren't we? You grow up in homes, and parents are sentient beings. They have biases and prejudices. So as a child, you are exposed to those. Yeah. And so anybody who calls you fat, you should feel insulted. In some societies. In some societies, people say you're fat, you're insulted. In other societies, people say you're fat, you feel complimented. It means that you're rich. Okay? In some societies, you're taught to hate people who look like this, but in other societies, you're taught to hate people who look like that. So these are all, they're acquired afflictions. Those aren't the innate ones. Of course, you have to have the innate ones to have the acquired ones. But a lot of, our views, as they apply to this particular lifetime, are things we learned in this life. Yeah. I mean, for example, for human beings, race is a big thing. For cats, I don't think that, that they have much prejudice against each other because they're different colors. Yeah. They didn't learn that. But human beings, in human society, make a big deal out of that. And so if you grow up as a human being, you hear people talk about it, you think it must be important, and you think like that. Yeah. But the cats don't care. Huh? So it's interesting, what we choose as, or how we create a whole level of affliction that isn't there when we came out of our mother's womb. Yeah. When you came out of your mother's womb, probably you weren't even sensitive if somebody, said you were ugly, or if somebody, criticized you for not knowing how to read or do math. You're a baby. Somebody criticizing you, don't care. Yeah. But we learn to care about certain things. Yeah. So we often learn, from our surroundings, what we're supposed to feel offended about and who we're supposed to hate and what we're supposed to like. Yeah. But when you think about it, a lot of it is just learned. Okay. So I would say that, everybody being attached to material things, that would be an innate one. Everybody wants material stuff, okay? But, somebody wanting a Rolex watch, that's a kind of attachment or greed that's learned. Yeah. If you live in some other culture, a Rolex watch would just, it's heavy and you have to carry it around with you. Who needs it? Okay. Are you seeing what I'm getting at? And it's quite interesting when we think about it, And this is why I think it's so beneficial to live in other cultures, because the things you think are important about, other people don't, and the things they think are important, you don't understand. Years ago when I was traveling in the former Soviet Union, I was in, where was I? Romania. And there's Hungarians mixed in as part of the population in the section of Romania where I was. Okay? And the people I was staying with, then they start talking, the Hungarians this, the Hungarians that. And I said, why are you talking about Hungarians? Oh, well, they're all around and they do this and that. And I said, I don't see them. Yeah. had no way, oh, well, they dress in this way and they talk like this and they walk like that. It was all things that I would never even notice. I can't tell one accent from another when they're speaking Romanian. I can't tell, different clothes. They all look like clothes, and some are ethnic clothes. I don't know which ones are Hungarian and which ones are Romanian. And I don't have a grudge against the Hungarians because, the Hungarian Empire used to occupy Romania. It was really interesting to see that, and how you learn certain things. So I can imagine people coming here now and like going, what in the world is going on in the U.S.? Yeah. Some of you feel that? Yeah? Like, huh? Why are these things important? Huh? But you learn, oh, this must be very important, and you need to get upset about it. Human beings, boy. Okay. So we all have similar types of emotions and attitudes. However, the words we use to speak of them and the concepts that influence how we relate to them vary. Similarly, the behaviors motivated by certain emotions will be socially acceptable in some cultures, but not for others. And similarly, socially accepted for some people, but not for others. One of the female senators, I forget which one, in the Kavanaugh hearings, who he spoke very rudely to, said, if I spoke like he spoke in the hearings, if I spoke that way in his courtroom, he would kick me out. Because women are not allowed to talk like he talked in the hearing. Men can do that. Yeah. Trump said, bravo, he came out swinging. Great, that's the kind of guy I like. But if a woman did that, oh boy. She's so emotional, she's so theatric, she's making a mountain out of a molehill, get out of here, go cry somewhere else. It's amazing, isn't it? Certain behaviors are okay for some people, not for other people. Yeah. Quite interesting. I gave some simple examples here. For example, sticking out our tongue, which is a sign of friendliness and respect in Tibetan culture, because it indicates that you aren't saying any kind of black magic mantra to harm somebody. So you kind of slurp when you're doing it. Lasso. I can't do it very well. But that's a sign of friendliness in Tibetan culture and respect. Okay? But in the West, that behavior is seen as quite rude, isn't it? Okay. Alternatively, clapping our hands in Western culture is a sign of approval. In Tibetan culture, it is done to chase away the spirits. So when young husbandsman and his British troops went into Tibet in the early years of the 20th century, and they were marching in the streets, the Tibetans were standing there clapping, and young husbandsmen thought that they were welcoming all the British troops. And they were actually thinking that they were spirits and wanting to chase them away by clapping. Yeah. That's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. The words used to label emotions have many nuances. In addition, there may not always be an exact correspondence in meaning between the Sanskrit or Tibetan word and the English term used to translate it. When reading Buddhist works in English, we must take care not to impute the ordinary meaning of a word onto a term that has a specific meaning in the Buddhist context. So remember that.
It's so hard.
That's because our minds think that there's a truly existent referent to a word.
That's all we know.
But, okay, constructive and destructive emotions. When speaking of positive and negative emotions, Buddhists differentiate multiple meanings of the words for some emotions. For example, attachment, fear, anger, and disillusionment have multiple meanings depending on the circumstances, and it is important to distinguish the different forms of these emotions in order to avoid confusion. And similarly, it's important to understand when these terms are used to translate a Tibetan or Sanskrit word or Pali word, that the meaning is not necessarily our ordinary English meaning. So, first example, attachment. And it's very interesting. I find this so often, especially with one manuscript I'm working with now, when I talk about like attachment to the clock, they change it, like we have to eliminate our attachment to material possession. The editor will say, we have to eliminate our attachments. Because for them, attachments refers to the object of attachment. So this one editor's is always, we have to abandon give away our attachments. And it's like, and more than one editor has done this. Even though I try and explain this and it's used consistently in a certain way. Yeah.
It's like your appliance that has a bunch of attachments.
Okay. So although the multiple meanings of the word attachment, or among the multiple meanings of the word attachment, one form of attachment is necessary for our physical and psychological well-being. Another one is one of what are called the three poisons, of three afflictions that poison our own and others' well-being. So the first kind of attachment, the one that is necessary for physical and psychological well-being, is spoken of in psychology and refers to a feeling of closeness or connection among people. For example, psychologists speak of the attachment a baby has for his or her mother. Such attachment or bonding with the mother or mother figure is necessary for the psychological well-being of the child. Yeah? So that's something, that is necessary in samsara for psychological well-being. Okay? This feeling of closeness or attachment is present in families and enables them to function together as a unit for the benefit of each member. Healthy attachment in a harmonious family has a realistic understanding of the other member's capabilities and fosters mutual respect. Okay? So here, the definition of attachment is not referring to sticky, gooey, I don't want to ever be separated from you kind of attachment. It's referring to something that has a realistic understanding of the other family members' capabilities, and it fosters mutual respect. Yeah. So it's kind of like knowing somebody really well and accepting them the way they are. Yeah. That could be defined as a healthy kind of attachment. Similarly, attachment unifies the citizens of a country, facilitating their cooperation for the benefit of society. in the sense that everybody feels, oh, we are a unit, and I'm part of that unit. And so, when you recognize a group and you feel a member of a group, then you can, then that helps the group to function in a harmonious way. Yeah. This form of attachment produces good results. But it's very different from the form of attachment that is, like in terms of our country, my country is the best one. We're going to negotiate everything so we have the best deal. We don't care about anybody else. It's not that. It's just a feeling of, okay, you live near certain people, and so you want to work together for the benefit of the entire group. Buddhists have a positive use of the term as well. Yeah. Now this may surprise you, okay? So bodhisattvas are said to be attached to sentient beings because they feel a tremendous sense of closeness and responsibility for the welfare of each and every sentient being that spurs them to practice. So there's one, I think it's in Nune, one prayer to Chenrezig that talks about Chenrezig's attachment to sentient beings. So that's what attachment means. It's the same word that's often translated as attachment, or at least one syllable of it is. But there it's used in a positive way to mean, Chenrezig's attached to sentient beings. He's not going to, because of his compassion, he's not going to walk out, and neglect sentient beings. Kuan Yin is attached to sentient beings and keeps helping them. Okay? So their love, so the Bodhisattva's love for sentient beings invigorates them to do whatever they can to alleviate suffering and bring happiness. They do this with greater energy and joy than we ordinary people work to benefit ourselves. More commonly in Buddhism, however, attachment, and here are the two Sanskrit words that we're using to translate as attachment. Sometimes Trishna is translated as desire, which is a little bit a difficult word. Raga is sometimes greed. Yeah, but again, greed doesn't encompass all the kinds of attachment. Greed, we would say, is just wanting more than your fair share. Okay, but when we say attachment, our meaning of attachment in Buddhism is much more than wanting your fair share. It's not wanting to be separated from what you like. It's wanting to hang on to something as your own, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this attachment, however, attachment refers to one of the 3 poisons and one of the 6 root afflictions. This attachment is a mental factor that, based on exaggeration or projection of good qualities, clings onto its desired object. When we say object, that could include people. With attachment, we hunger after, crave, cling to, and become obsessed with an object, person, idea, place, and so forth. When we succeed in procuring the object of our attachment, we are happy. But when that desire is frustrated, we become angry, resentful, and jealous. Good description of your mind? These emotions, in turn, motivate destructive actions to procure or protect the cherished object. We can clearly see that the greed of a CEO for money, or the craving of a sports or movie star for fame, leads to harmful actions and suffering for himself and others. Now, when attachment is moderate, society in general considers it to be a positive emotion. Okay, that's why after 9/11 we were told to go shopping. You know, having attachment for material possessions is a normal thing that benefits society. Okay. There's a feeling of excitement, of happiness or excitement at meeting someone wonderful, receiving a desired possession, or being praised by the people we value. However, from a Buddhist viewpoint, such attachment is based on exaggeration, and while it may be captivating at the beginning of a new relationship, it will hinder the relationship from being harmonious and mutually beneficial in the long term. This is because attachment leads to unrealistic expectations. Put that in highlight. Yeah. Difficulties and disappointments naturally follow when we discover that the object of our attachment doesn't possess all the wonderful qualities we thought it did. Yeah, how many times have we experienced that? Yeah? Although the pizza today was pretty good. This attachment is sneaky. For example, when family members' affection becomes neediness and possessiveness, and generates demands based on unrealistic expectations, it turns into unhealthy attachment. If someone's appreciation for his country makes him suspicious of foreigners on the basis of nationality or ethnicity alone, attachment has set in. This book was written in 2012, 2013. This emotion can cause prejudice and discrimination, and the person may go so far as to deny others their human rights. This is His Holiness speaking, once I met a Chilean scientist who spoke of scientists being attached to their field of study. He said that any exaggerated clinging onto one's field of study, political beliefs, or religion is harmful. This man was not a Buddhist, but he understood that it is the mental state of clinging, not the object clung to, that causes problems. In the case of a scientist, such attachment could lead to ignoring contrary evidence or even rigging the result of experiments or misreporting data collected from them. Similar disadvantages accrue to a person attached to their own religion or political views. Okay? So this scientist, not a Buddhist, but right away he understood what it means when we exaggerate or project good qualities that aren't there and then have all sorts of expectations on whatever it is. Yeah. And we've seen this year, some scientists have run into trouble for doing this exact thing of, misreporting evidence and rigging experiments and everything. And we see it all the time when we're attached to something, how we navigate our way around to get what we want. Yeah. Some people ask whether it is possible to be attached to nirvana or to the Buddha. Aspiring for nirvana, this question comes a lot because people at the beginning, when they meet the Dharma, they think they confuse any positive feeling with attachment. And they think any, noticing the good qualities of someone or something is attachment. And that's not the meaning of attachment. Okay? And then they get very, very confused because then they think you can't enjoy anything, As a Buddhist, you're not supposed to enjoy anything because that's attachment. No. Does that mean you have to walk around being miserable? Did Buddha teach us to be miserable? I don't think so. Buddha was trying to teach us to be happy. So aspiring for nirvana or to have the Buddha's qualities is not attachment. The mind is clear, and although it is attracted to its object, there is no exaggeration present because the Buddha and nirvana possess magnificent qualities. Still, according to the Prasangika viewpoint, as long as there is subtle self-grasping, in this case grasping nirvana or the Buddha to exist inherently, there is the potential for subtle attachment to arise. If someone then clings to nirvana and desperately wants to attain it as if it were an external object, exaggeration is present in the mind. Okay? So sometimes we have people, I say, are people who have ordination fever. They want to get ordained right away, and it's like, I got to get ordained right away because this, is like the one and only thing, the one thing, So there's some exaggeration involved there. Yeah, we may all have had it. Yeah, but there's some exaggeration involved. Whereas just a peaceful mind saying, I want to get ordained and seeing the good qualities of that, that's not attachment. Okay? Or, for example, regarding our spiritual mentors, we may look at one of our teachers' good qualities and just say, boy, I really respect that and I want to become like that. And then there's the mind that says, oh, they're so wonderful. They fulfill all my needs. They pay attention to me. I want to be close to them. Please, spiritual mentor, look at me. Pay attention to me. Tell me I'm special, ... Okay? That's clearly attachment. Okay? But you can see, it's, we get into all this stuff. Okay. When this person who has this kind of exaggerated attachment for Dharma things, when this person studies and practices the Dharma, eventually the distorted aspect will be dispelled, and she will have a genuine aspiration for nirvana that is free from attachment. So keep working at it, and the mind calms down, Okay, so then there's a reflection. So this is homework for you. What are some of the common meanings of the English word attachment? What are the disadvantages of the afflictive type of attachment? And is it easy to tell when attachment is the sense of affection and respect? When attachment in the sense of affection and respect slips into exaggeration and expectation. Okay, so think about it this week, and then we'll share reflections on it next week. Okay, so then the next one, emotion that can have multiple meanings. Fear is another emotion that can be spoken of in two ways. In common parlance, fear is usually associated with panic, anxiety, worry, and distress. It is considered a negative emotion because it feels so unpleasant and is often based on unrealistic thinking. From a Buddhist viewpoint, this kind of fear is afflictive because it is based on exaggeration and self-preoccupation, and it leads a person to engage in actions or make decisions that are unwise. So what are some examples from your own life of fear that's been based on exaggeration and self-preoccupation and has led you to make unwise decisions or do things that are not very good? Everybody's so quiet. What's an example of this? None of you are anxious? None of you have anxiety or worry?
Yes.
I'm thinking of times when I may have been worried about the results of decisions, especially decisions that group decisions that make a change, and been nervous about it enough to be what would be the term? Let me think. In a way, unwilling to try a change in things that I wasn't feeling confident with. Yeah, and I'm not thinking of exact examples to give you, but that's the pattern I'm seeing.
Yeah. Okay, so a pattern of wanting to stay with what's familiar and not expose yourself to anything different.
Yeah, but like being, uncooperative about a change.
Change, yeah.
That would be the negative part of it, or being, resistant. That's the word I'm looking for.
Or uncooperative, yeah. Lots of times we're afraid, a group makes a decision and we're afraid of how that's going to affect us. And so we become uncooperative. Yeah, but that's all other people who do that, huh? Not us.
I don't know how well this relates, but I used to live in a very small duplex, and I invited my family over for, I think it was a Christmas get-together, and the family was a lot larger than the place. And they brought their kids, and the kids were larger than the place. And very soon it started to be unmanageable. And the parents were not doing anything to control their kids. And as they were running around and throwing things and bumping things and hitting things, my anxiety was up to the point where I couldn't contain it. And I basically kicked them out of the house. And that was horrible. It caused some damage to some relationships. And but yeah, it was as a result of my own anxiety that I couldn't control, and fear and worry about what the neighbors were going to say about the noise and all this. So yeah, that was one of those.
Yeah. How about times when you've been afraid of what somebody's going to say to you, and you spend a lot of time just going around in circles before even encountering the person, trying to plan out all the possible things they could say, and all your possible defenses? How about some other examples?
Well, a lot of my fear when I'm asked to do a review, or I'm asked to do a BBC, or I'm asked to do anything Dharma, I struggle with my own self-confidence, and so I have a fear about not being clear, not being able to articulate, not being correct, not telling the truth, even though I spend weeks preparing and I look at it over and over again, that I have this fundamental lack of self-confidence that I understand what I'm saying. And so what happens sometimes is, after I do these sharings and stuff, I coyly and subtly ask people how it went, because I myself can't evaluate myself correctly and say, well, you did the best you could. I always kind of look a little bit for some feedback to get what I call coyly a reality check to see how it landed. And so my efforts and my intention are well placed, but my confidence doesn't match it. So the anxiety of how is it going to be beneficial? The intention's well, but the fear is not well founded. Mm-hmm. And so I continually need to be reassured, because the last thing I want to do is to ever lie about the Dharma. Mm-hmm. And so I have a fundamental fear of maybe doing that, even though I don't know how I have that fear, but I do.
Mm-hmm. And that could affect how you teach. Yeah.
First, to share something that people online said. 2 people said they had feared the results of medical tests, so they decided not to go to the doctor and ignored symptoms that led to more complications.
That's an excellent example. Mm-hmm. Excellent example of how fear led us to make an unwise decision. Yeah. And we do that, don't we? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess for my own life, I had a lot of fear of not having a good reputation and not being successful. Mm-hmm. So even though I was deeply passionate about the arts and the theater, but everybody told me I was going to starve to death and be poor, right, if I pursued my dreams. So the exaggeration, and it's amazing when I talk to Singapore kids, you fail one test and they think they're going to never get a job. It's
yeah.
But I had that mind, right? A B equals end of the world. So I chose not to pursue my dreams, and I got a scholarship and did what was successful, but was profoundly miserable.
Because you were afraid of
criticism. I looked at people in the arts constantly being criticized or fighting censorship, and my mother told me actors are like prostitutes. I'm like, okay, great. No support.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, it's like, all kinds, just the pressure added up, and I just wasn't strong enough to not be angry or just be clear within myself, this is what I care about, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah. But it turned out well in the end, didn't it?
Yes, in the end, yes. Now, yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you want to be dancing on some stage? No? Okay. Okay. Where were we? Confused, afflictive. Okay, second paragraph. Another kind of fear has an element of wisdom. It is an awareness of possible danger that causes us to exercise caution. While this fear may sometimes feel unpleasant, it is useful, and it is free from the emotional torment of ordinary fear. Okay, so we're differentiating 2 different kinds of fears. The freak-out fear that makes you do things that aren't so smart, and then the wise fear that realizes there's some danger and the need to act. For example, awareness that you live in an area that is prone to earthquakes encourages people to make and heed building codes to protect buildings from collapsing. People lay careful plans and take precautions without being immersed in uncontrollable panic. Yeah, if you live in California, you're not anxious about earthquakes all day. Actually, you're usually totally spaced out until they happen. Yeah. Because if you really thought that the big one could happen, you wouldn't live there. Yeah. People, this wisdom fear is also at work when we merge onto a highway. Aware of the danger of other vehicles driving at high speeds, we drive carefully. Parents instill in young children a respectful fear of matches. In the above examples, fear is useful and is not afflictive. The difference between afflictive fear and wisdom fear is the presence or absence of exaggeration. Okay, so there's some things that, it's really important that we are aware of the danger of doing some things. Otherwise, we're just space cases. Yeah. When we are attuned to the facts of the situation, fear is not distorted, But when we exaggerate some aspect of the situation, fear is unrealistic and leads to suffering. This is something really, spend some time in your practice making examples of this in your life. Yeah, especially if you're somebody who gets anxious about different things, or you worry about what somebody's going to think about you, you worry about what's going to happen. You know, we're digging the well now, yeah, and we got down to 350 feet. We still don't have enough water. You know, do we dig deeper? Do we start another place? But you relocate to another place, and that's $20,000 just to start digging in another place. Or do we stay where we're at and we go deeper, but maybe we don't find any water, and we stay up at night worrying all about this, like what happens this and what happens that and this and that. Yeah, it's a good thing to worry about, don't you think? Yeah, if we don't have enough water, yeah, or have to spend who knows how much money digging who knows how many wells. Because even you try another place, no guarantee you're going to have enough water there. Yeah. So all you witches, you know, it didn't work.
Which spot did they use?
It was the spot that we all agreed on.
Uh-huh.
In the example of the well, one way to look at that is that it's just not helpful to be worrying about it at night. It's not, yeah. I mean, why worry if your worry's not going to help?
Yeah.
I mean.
But you see, that kind of fear has nothing to do with reason.
Right.
Yeah. It's like.
That reminds me of an example when I was traveling with you in India and we were in that car going from the south of India back to Bangalore, and he got on the wrong highway. And I was getting sick with a cold, so I was already more susceptible to stress, which I'm really susceptible to anyway. And we're going the wrong way on this major highway, and the highway is filled with all things, you know, trucks filled with hay and people all over these trucks, and this ongoing traffic. And I'm looking at Venerable Children and I'm saying, not much of anything, but then Venerable Children eventually just goes to sleep. I'm gripping my thigh and I'm trying not to scream. It was just a hell round for me. And who's sleeping at peaceful? Venerable Children. So eventually I just got worn out and gave up.
Yeah, that was an interesting car ride. Yeah, but try telling your driver to go the right way on the highway. He doesn't care. Okay. Certain meditations in the stages of the path are designed to arouse wisdom fear in us. When we meditate on the disadvantages of cyclic existence, wisdom fear motivates us to practice the path to liberate ourselves from samsaric suffering. The meditation on death is meant to provoke not an emotional, panicky fear of death, which is of no benefit at all, but a wise awareness of our mortality that leads us to set good priorities in life, abandon negative, harmful actions, and live ethically and kindly. Okay, so you see the difference between the two kinds of fear. In Thailand, some monks from the forest tradition meditate in fearful places such as cemeteries, jungles, and forests with ferocious animals. Before 1959, meditators in Tibet did the same. If panicky fear arose in their minds, motivated by the suffering that such fear produces, they would make a strong effort to generate samadhi, or the wisdom-realizing emptiness, in order to overcome it. Yeah. So I heard a lot of stories like this when I was in Thailand. Achun Mun, a famous ascetic Thai monk who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century, and his disciples practiced in this way. And there are many stories of them entering deep states of samadhi when encountering a tiger in the jungle. It's true, it's like, okay, there's the tiger and here's me. And what's going to protect me from, freaking out? Entering into one of the dhyanas. And so they would enter the dhyana. And then when they would come out of their meditation, the tiger would be gone. They might see the tiger paw prints there, but the tigers very seldom bothered a meditator. The great Tibetan yogi Milarepa practiced similarly, and meditators in the Chö tradition deliberately invoke spirits and ghosts to spur them to generate deep bodhicitta and wisdom. If someone meditates on the sufferings of the lower realms and panicky fear instead of wisdom fear arises, what should she do? First, she should remind herself that panic is not the desired outcome of the meditation. Okay? Usually people forget that. Once you get into panicky fear, you don't reason. Your reason is out the window. Then, realizing that she has the ability to avoid the causes for such rebirth, she should turn her mind to the three jewels and take refuge in them. Instead of allowing herself to be overwhelmed by this unrealistic fear, a well-trained practitioner will use it to reaffirm her connection to the three jewels. Okay, so when we're sick, when we're in dangerous situations, this is what we need to do. Yeah. So underline this, and, you'll probably forget it exactly when you need it, but maybe you might remember it, and then it will be a big benefit to really help you. Yeah. Because otherwise we see people, who are Buddhists, who do different practices for a long period of time, but when they get sick, or old, or something, happens, they completely freeze. Or get quite, panicky and like that. And I think that's, because of, when a similar emotion arose earlier, they didn't remember to apply the antidote. So they were completely untrained when something big happened and just, got really out of control. Okay, so this is why it's important to practice. Yeah. Some scriptures speak of using the presence or absence of panicky fear as a way to examine whether or not a person is an arhat. Yeah. When that person is meditating or sitting casually, someone makes a sudden, sharp, loud sound. If that person does not jump or gasp with fear, it is said that he has attained high levels of the path. According to this example, it seems that some level of self-grasping is present when an ordinary person experiences fear, but is absent when they are liberated from cyclic existence. And that would make a lot of sense to me because, fear is based on attachment, and attachment's based on self-grasping. Yeah. And so if you've attained liberation, you're not worried about your body. So that, now of course it may be an automatic, thing that's just habituated, but that would be different. But otherwise, yeah, the fear comes, we're attached to our body, aren't we?
Just as we've been talking about this, and a little bit when I was reading it before, but more now that it's out, is this feeling of what is innate fear and what is acquired fear, kind of looking at what those two things are, and then thinking about if we're really well prepared for death and die without fear, that it's possible to do that, then we can assume that even for an ordinary, somehow even for an ordinary being, that innate fear of death, which I think probably is innate, is something that we can take care of or work with even now. We don't have to be arhats to do that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we're not going to get rid of it now.
Right.
Unless, because it's only the wisdom that realizes emptiness that does that. But we can certainly practice when it arises. Practice calming ourselves. Yeah? Is that making sense? Sometimes it is said that bodhisattvas fear samsara as well as the personal peace of an arhat's nirvana. While the word fear is used to indicate their unwillingness to stay in either of these states, it is not the fear that we ordinary people experience. Our fear is usually based on self-grasping and self-centeredness, while bodhisattvas fear when they say that they're afraid of samsara and personal nirvana. That fear is underlain with compassion and wisdom that wants to attain Buddhahood in order to benefit others as soon as they can. Yeah? So if you're really, we use the word fear in that way now too. If you really want to accomplish something that's beneficial and you see obstacles, you could say, I'm afraid of that obstacle. That doesn't mean that you're panicky. Yeah, it doesn't mean that there's self-grasping, but it means that you're aware that you can't control everything. Okay. Other questions or comments? The next section, I don't think we really have time for it. Because anger will need some discussion on that. So any other questions or comments here?
I do want to say that in the past number of years, I've been able to use the wisdom fear to really counteract my habits that used to come a lot more automatically, whether it was divisive speech or the anxiety or being attached to my reputation. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to see that the results of that mind far outweigh me holding my precepts and keeping myself on track. Mm-hmm. Before, I never understood the ethical component of a lot of my afflictive actions of body and speech. Mm-hmm. I would just do them and then pay the consequences later. I'm now getting it to where I'm backed up a little bit more, that I'm actually pausing before I do those things, realizing that I already know what the results are.
Yeah.
So that wisdom fear is saying, where this goes.
Yeah.
you know where this goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good kind of fear to have, because it makes us pay attention to things we need to pay attention to.
Someone online wanted to thank you for being honest and ethical on U.S. politics. It's really nice to hear from a bhikkhuni. It also feels like so much of tonight is influenced by what lay people might need right now after the bombings. Thank you. And then someone asked, what about fear for future generations? That won't affect us directly, but the environmental threats are scary.
Yeah. So what we want to have there is a wisdom fear, and then motivated for compassion for future generations to prevent creating the causes, that of results that will be harmful to them. So that would be a kind of wisdom fear too. Now, of course, if you get all panicky about, there's going to be so much pollution, and there's going to be this, and there's going to be that, and then the bomb is going to run out. Ooh, that's gone too far. Okay? But if you're just, there's a wisdom awareness of the danger, for example, of climate change, and not paying heed to it, and not taking measures to stop it. Yeah? that kind of fear is something that we need, because it will spur us to action. Yeah. But then some people go too far and they get really afraid, and then that becomes the useless anxiety fear.
And then that useless anxiety fear can sometimes lead to anger, and then people are doing things that are not productive.
Yeah.
They think they are. They think, I got to do something, but they get angry at people they see as being part of the cause of maybe climate change, or standing in the way of us all changing what we do. And then when you're angry at someone, they get defensive and they can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so it becomes counterproductive.
Yep. Yep.
What I'm noticing tonight with you reading this, Venerable, and unpacking it, is that I'm experiencing wear and tear from all of this stuff that's happening in our country. And this is like a course correction, this tone of understanding and this compassionate wisdom. And I don't know, I think we all at times just get susceptible to all of this news that we're engulfed in.
Yeah. Well, the news, no matter which station you listen to, is designed to make us afraid. And especially now, people are using fear to try and motivate the voters. Yeah. And that may motivate some people, but it makes a mess in their minds and it makes a mess in the country. Instead of being motivated by fear, which is based on so much, distorted fact, alternative facts and fake news, instead of that, just knowing, okay, whatever happens, I have to keep my balance and behave appropriately and think appropriately and deal with what happens. Yeah. And then really go back to what Shantideva said. If you can do something about it, do it. If you can't, don't worry. There's nothing you can do. Yeah. And I think basic, what I do in looking at all this is it all comes down to, this is samsara, what do I expect? I don't like this, I don't like that, that's scary, this scary. I could freak out by the whole thing. But it's like, this is samsara, why am I expecting it to be a Pure Land? Yeah, if I don't like this, then I better do something with my mind and get out of here. Yeah, get out of the self-grasping. And until that, it's a result of my own actions. So why am I getting upset? That's it. So we have to start with small things. The small things. Otherwise, if you wait until the big things, then it's really difficult. But yeah, start with the small things.
Like getting along with each other.
Yeah. Or I'm thinking, when I fell on the way to go to see His Holiness, and there's this, I just heard this big crack when my head hit the asphalt. And it's like, see, she's getting worried. It happened a few months ago. It's not happening now, And I just thought, okay, maybe I cracked my head open, maybe I didn't. Let's get up and see if there's blood anywhere. And, and there wasn't. And, it didn't seem like I had a concussion. And my knee's still a little bit weird, but, what to do? I just immediately said, purified some karma. what was I going to do? You know, go into, walk up to the private office. I fell down, went boom. Yeah. Meanwhile, I went in there. They didn't even notice, you know. Yeah, His Holiness noticed. But the people in the office didn't notice. You were taking out those wipe it things, and we were kind of trying to clean me up. And everybody else was so excited trying to get in to see His Holiness. They didn't notice. Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah.
Please take care of yourself.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a klutz. Okay, shall we dedicate?